Welcome back. Today, we have an extra special treat for everybody. My guest today is an osteopathic physician. He is a holistic healer. He is the founder of Healer and healer.com. He is also the founder of Integrate Health. He is one of the leading experts in the country on plant medicine, on cannabis, on medical cannabis. He has been doing it for a long time right here in our home state. My guest today, Dustin Sulak.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here.
Man, it is awesome to have you here. Being a guy who got into, took a leap into cannabis as someone who had a medical background. I was a pharmacist by trade. Before I knew you, I definitely looked up to you and was like, this guy is awesome. I can't wait to deepen my relationship with him. I can't wait to meet him. What he's doing is so cool, really beats to his own drum. Might be Polish, just by the look of him, giddy up. He seems like my type of guy. And then we got to meet, and it was even better than that, man. You're like everything that, that you can read about you online, all the stuff that's out there. Meeting you in person is even better, and I appreciate everything that you do for the community and how you're able to be your authentic self.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Thanks for the platform to share the message.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, we were discussing some stuff. I saw you at the last Maine Fungi Fest, which is an incredible event. You were, giving a talk on psychedelics and parenting. And, we had just started to talk about the decentralization of medicine and where that's going. And I feel like you've been doing that since forever, since your career started. And, I think it's also kind of becoming a buzzword, decentralization. And so I would like to, the first question I want to ask you is just what does that mean to you? What does decentralized medicine mean to you?
Well, I think what we're talking about being decentralized mostly is the decision-making that happens in medicine. There's probably other aspects of medicine that can be decentralized as well, like the resource distribution and the innovation. But really, when it comes to the decision-making on the front lines of medicine, more and more since I've been a doctor, and probably in the last 30 or 40 years, there's been a trend of moving that decision-making to a central authority. So that'll be the guidelines of the, board organizations or the American Medical Association or the CDC or whatever it is. Doctors over time turn into keepers of the algorithm, and they learn pattern recognition. They know which tests to order, and which things to which boxes to do. The electronic health records have become more convenient for practicing medicine in a way where it becomes more automatic and algorithmic, and the decisions are being made more by, maybe decision makers that don't have the health of the individual as their primary target, as their primary incentive. Versus in the old days, I think doctors didn't have these types of resources, and they really had to, boots on the ground, think about the patient, be great thinkers, rely on physical exam, rely on the art of medicine, rely on intuition, and rely on the connection, rely more on the health. And I think that's, probably where we want to go with this conversation, is that the centralized medical model doesn't take into account very well the complexity of health and healing, and all that goes into that. It's symptom diagnosis, maybe symptom test diagnosis, treatment, and then there's also this incredible over reliance on single molecule treatment, single molecules that are patentable, that have single targets in the body, and we can get into why that just doesn't make a lot of sense for most cases of illness.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear your perspective on that. But first, I want to share with you, because it's so funny. When I was in school and I was learning, I remember, I'm entrepreneurial minded. So I was already trying to think of how can I use, this type of skill that I think that I have in entrepreneurship and use it in pharmacy. And one of the things that I identified that I thought would have been good, and that I don't know, if this was training or why I was thinking this way, but a problem with pharmacy is that you don't have, you can have polypharmacy where a patient's going to multiple different, pharmacies, and they're getting all these different, um, prescriptions, and uh, they might interact with each other. And like, as a pharmacist, you want to know all this stuff, and you want to know it so you can help the patient the best. And so like in my head, I was like thinking like, okay, we should have a system where it all goes up to the top, and there's this centralized, centralized pharmacy location that it knows every single drug you've ever taken, every surgery you've ever had. And like in a in a perfect world, that like that having that information, or a doctor having that information, would be ideal. And if they were then able to go and then interact with the patient and connect with them. But that's what I wanted to create, this centralized system. So it's so fun. It's like, I think the universities probably had me already thinking that way to go, I don't know why. Because
Well, I think that the ability for healthcare information to move across boundaries and to have access to that, I do think that that can improve patient care. The cost of it, so that if somebody came and saw me and I had an accurate history of their entire, medical experience, including their adverse reactions, that would be helpful. And if I could have a machine kind of summarize that for me, or give me cautions based on that history when I was, going to try another treatment, that it sounds good. And I think that that would be really helpful if it existed amongst an incentive structure that was working for the best outcome in the patient. And so what do I mean by that? I mean, well, number one, there's the privacy concern, right? So I would want that system to be pseudonymous in some way, so that, people couldn't be penalized or excluded or, targeted for having certain levels of health.
that's why I decided not to build it, was
Sure.
because when I looked into like HIPAA law and all, I was like, oh man, would be really challenging, and I don't think we're quite there yet to be able to protect everybody.
Yeah. So right. If we had the tech, and maybe we have it now, but it's not being used, for it to be kind of like a private public key pair or something where people actually own their own data
Mhm.
and can choose how much of their identity to associate with it versus a pseudonym.
Mhm.
That might be helpful. But then there's, another consideration would be, well, what about that algorithm that's summarizing it for me and that's giving me warnings about them? Like, how can I trust that to be aligned with my incentives for actually helping the patient? Maybe I could, but these would be big questions,
Huge question.
and it just becomes very easy for the technology to be used, instead of for those purposes to help the patient, to be used to control the system and to feed this, medical complex and its insatiable growth.
Yeah, because that's really what it comes down to. It's so another example of this is like 10 years ago, if you wanted to get an MRI, it was like a challenging thing. You needed to go through certain steps, and they didn't maybe have all the machines available, and you need to get a PA and go through it. Now it's like, if you want an MRI, go get an MRI. We'll MRI everybody. We'll give, just pay us the copay, and pay us the higher copay, and we'll MRI everybody. And so they've created this system where like everybody can go and get what get a service that they don't necessarily need.
Well, it's not realistic. Most people right now, when they access healthcare services, they don't get the same feeling they do when they come to you and buy a jar of honey, for example. Like, you're giving them something of value. They understand how much value that has. They feel very good about handing you cash or whatever form of payment. And in exchange for that value, it feels like a transaction. They get to think about it. Do I want to spend my money on this honey or not? But, with healthcare, it's so many steps removed from that type of value for value transaction, where people don't know. And when you don't know how much it's costing, and you have no sense of what this is going to feel like on your bank account or your wallet, the decision making changes drastically. That, for one thing, and so the most egregious example of this is just how much we spend at the end of life. We'll spend, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's somewhere between 10 and 30% of healthcare expenditures are in the last couple weeks of life. And that's, it's just this unrealistic relationship with the cost of the care that we're providing, and it interferes with making a good decision about it. The other thing that it undermines is a very basic principle. If you look at a lot of methods of healing from, millennia and all around the world, there's often this idea that there has to be an exchange for healing to be most effective. There needs to be, you got to give in order to receive. This very basic fair exchange principle, very important in healing, important in business also. But when you take that away, and now the patient, some patients might feel entitled to just receive the time, energy, and resources of others. And some people may feel guilty that they're receiving all of this, resentful that they're not able to get that MRI. Like it turns the whole thing into a big mess, in my opinion. And I don't pretend to know all the solutions for how to get out of it, but I know the problem, and having had the benefit and blessing of being able to practice free market medicine for the last 15 years, I see what types of solutions emerge when you take away these artificial structures and you allow people to rely on, what am I going to do to help this person right now? How can I figure out how to do it in a cost-effective way?
Yeah, what'd you call it? Market-free medicine?
Yeah, free market medicine.
Free market medicine. Free market medicine. I love that. And yeah, man, you've been practicing, and so like your ethos is to help the patient as best possible with the connection that you have with them, and as well as doing it as most cost effective.
Absolutely. I mean, isn't that what people would hire me to do?
Oh,
What else could I?
of course.
What else would, it's almost baffling for me to think that someone might want me to do something other than that, right? Help them in the best way that I could, if for as cost effective as possible. But it turns out that most of medicine isn't incentivized to behave that way.
That's you just said it. It's the incentives. So the incentives are so backwards. The doctors are not incentivized to help people, and it's like people who are they get into this because they want to go help people, and then they heal, and then they immediately get into a system, and then they just are like, okay, I'm just gonna be a part of the system, unless you do something so drastic and so different, like what you did, opening up your own practice, deciding that you're gonna go through the hard roads of having the really tough conversations with the board of medicine and with the state that you're operating in, so that you can do things that other people might, see as, risky, or which is wild, because I'm talking about, giving, cannabis to people who are, not adults. And, people would see that as very risky, when it's literally why wouldn't they see that as like giving a pharmaceutical is also as risky, but maybe because it doesn't have the psychedelic effect that cannabis can have. It's wild.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you said a lot there. I'll respond to some of it. I've always had this, it's just been part of my nature to be an independent thinker and to question things. And as you mentioned earlier, to beat to my own drum. This is actually something that I like for my patients as well. I'm not saying that all of them need to be leaders per se. I think there's different types and different individuals. But when I look at somebody's capacity to be healthy and enjoy their life, it usually is in some way determined by how much of their life force, meaning the time and energy that they spend each day, how much of that is aligned with their top values that make them an individual. If you and I made a list of our top values, things that are most important to us, there'd probably be a lot of overlap, but they'd be different. Each one is kind of like a fingerprint for that personality. And I think a lot of us are, in some ways deceiving ourselves about what those values really are. You can typically find them when you look at what your life is demonstrating, not who you hope you are or who you hope you're going to be. But when it really comes down to it, individuality tends to be healthy. I think that we each have a unique role because we're each unique people, unique individuals. And if we figure out, who the heck am I? How do I be that person? How do I allow my behaviors, actions, thoughts to align with these top values? At the end of the day, it's a good day. People feel good about that, and because they're feeling good about that, their physiology is functioning in greater harmony, have less stress, they have more resilience, they have more time spent in the flow state because they're doing what they love. So their hormones are better, their immune function is going to be better. They're going to sleep better that night because they're not stressed about living a lie. and that really adds up. So individuality, maybe it's more important for some than others. It's been very important for me, uh, but I, very quickly learned with, I think the help of cannabis when I was a teenager, that not everything I'm being told is true, and that I need to question, these authorities that may be deceiving me to figure out how I can have my healthiest, happiest life. And then I, just came into the profession. For me, it was the calling. I've wanted to be a doctor since I was very little. I was called to help other people do that as well. So I'm doing it in an individual way, and I'm treating people like individuals, not like cattle in a
Yeah.
stock operation. And that doesn't work well with algorithmic medicine. Big part of what I do in my office is really get to know people, what makes them tick. I do that through conversation. I also do that by putting them on my osteopathic table and sensing what their physiology is doing, how they're breathing, what their inherent motion feels like, how connected they are with their energy fields and their spirit, and helping provide connection and improvement in that system. And cannabis, it turns out to be, an incredibly versatile, cost-effective medicine. So being this kind of free market provider and treating people like individuals and spending a long time with them and really being a thinker instead of just an algorithm follower, this ends up getting me good results, which makes me popular amongst patients, which then makes me popular amongst patients that don't get good results elsewhere. And so I end up being a magnet for cases and conditions that are typically refractory to conventional therapy. Thankfully for me, there's no shortage of those. I wish that there was, but that's been kind of the art of my practice. I become a magnet for strange conditions that other doctors don't recognize or diagnose or understand, or common conditions that just don't have good treatments. And for the conditions for which medicine is kind of turning a blind eye to. Some examples of that would be like tick-borne disease, for example. I did my training here in Maine. You'd think I would emerge, as an expert in tick-borne disease. It was barely mentioned. In the meanwhile, like a huge portion of our patients, it's hard to determine what percentage, but has either been affected by tick-borne disease in the past or are currently exhibiting symptoms that are untreated. Now we have another whole wave of this with long COVID vaccine syndrome. Again, the mainstream medical establishment isn't really working this up, diagnosing it or treating it. And they're not going to until FDA says, or CDC says, or, AMA says, or whoever, like, oh, here's how to work it up. Here's the diagnosis code for it. And here's how to treatment, how to treat it. And they're not going to do that until there's a profit structure around those steps. Right. But in the meanwhile, I got, hundreds or thousands of patients that need this kind of help. But the point I was trying to make is that when you become a magnet for refractory conditions, you better have a good understanding of how to use cannabis, because it is an invaluable tool for this type of work. It is incredibly versatile, incredibly safe. Working with the endocannabinoid system, which is a master regulator, I think a lot of your viewers know, is master regulator of every other physiologic system. And so when you see someone with chronic illness, regardless of the etiology, it's very likely that you're going to be able to use cannabis in some way to help them feel better and potentially to help them get better. And so, rare conditions like the ones I mentioned, common conditions, cancer, neurologic conditions, these don't have boundaries between adults and children. And so why wouldn't we consider treating minors, treating children with the same medicine that has this safety profile that's often superior to the alternatives that they've already failed. You brought up that, well, cannabis has psychoactive effects. Maybe we should be more careful of that. Or maybe people are, more averse to that idea in children, using something with that could make them high or euphoric or, create a change in their consciousnness. And I agree, we should be, but we're not. In medicine, we're giving antidepressants and stimulants and, sometimes mood stabilizers, all sorts of psychoactive drugs to children all the time. And some of these are very effective treatments. I don't want to sound judgmental on them because there's some people that need them and they work incredibly well. But I think they also have a tendency to be overused and often started and then not stopped. and just continued for years and years. So I think like any situation, a patient's sick, they need help. The clinician's duty, in my opinion, is to evaluate all the options that we could do to help this person. And in that evaluation, what's the potential benefit? What are the potential risks? Communicate that with the patient, and based on their personal preferences and my clinical judgment, come to some agreement about what we're going to do first. And if that doesn't work, what are we going to do second? Make it an intelligent, real conversation between two individuals, not just this top-down algorithmic procedure.
Is the scale the problem? Is that the issue?
How many providers like myself can actually serve our population when the medical schools are basically cranking out? So medical training is a big problem, right? You brought this up briefly earlier.
Cannabis products are becoming more popular every day. Whether you're looking for the best night's sleep, trying to mitigate daily stress, or just trying to enjoy some laughter with friends, OG Cannabis is the store for you. OG Cannabis has an unbiased approach that is unique and simple. Unlike the competition, they don't sell their own manufactured products, but instead proudly showcase the best vendors across Maine. A dispensary like no other. Come and visit today at 18 American Way, Elliott, Maine. OG Cannabis. Oh, and don't forget to use my promo code, Dr. BeeWell. See you guys there. Giddy up.
I forgot how you said it, but I'll just share my experiences that when I was in my first year of medical school, I saw a lot of really bright, beautiful people with great hearts. They were in it for the right reason. They were idealistic and they really wanted to help people, and they were smart. And, the kind of common story, but this is absolutely real, is that most of these people in their first year, on the first day, they received some type of a message similar to this. Half of you are going to fail this year, and you better work your ass off and be competitive with each other and be scared of this outcome, because there's going to be a lot of debt attached to that, and so like you enter this group hypnosis of fear consciousness, which for one thing, it doesn't make learning and independent thinking easier when people are in that kind of fearful state. It makes them more limbic reactivity, more emotionally reactive, much easier to, for lack of a better word, we could say brainwash, or much easier to train behaviorally. Why don't we call it like that?
Yeah.
And so the medical system cranks out graduates that are easy to train behaviorally and have been trained to not necessarily think independently. There's going to be a lot of exceptions to that, but that's the problem. So could we scale this? I mean, I think it's been scaled before. I don't know the statistics, but I think there was probably a time, if we look back to the, maybe 40s or 50s or even 60s, when doctors were independent thinkers, decentralized decision-making on the front lines of medicine, not a lot of informatic tools, more like mentoring. And
I think the pushback is that there's more people, even though it's worse, it's way worse care, in my opinion. Right now, there's more people who are getting care right now than probably ever in history, I feel like. And that's what I mean with like scalability. Do we need to take it back?
The population is so high.
Yeah, the population is so high.
Proportion of medical providers grow with that?
For sure, but would we ever be able to get to a point where people care enough like you and would serve, and they don't have, is what happens is like is the growth ambition is just the capitalistic model then takes over because somebody, figures out a good system, and it's like, oh, well, that's a good system. And now how can we make as much money off of that system as possible? And then
so I want to differentiate there a little bit, because I think in a true capitalistic system, when somebody is saying, how can I make as much money off this as possible? That's synonymous with saying, how can I provide as much value to people?
Yeah, true capitalism.
That's true capitalism. How can I serve as many people something that's cheaper, better, more effective? And how can I scale that to help a lot of people? So that would be like a meritocracy, that you would make the most money when you do the most good. What we have instead is more of a cronyist system. And, we have this systematic theft of the population, not just through taxation, but especially through inflation and confusion. And, we're not just stealing we're not just having our money stolen from us. It's our attention, it's our energy, it's a lot of things.
Yeah.
But it is the value of our savings for sure. And because of that theft from the population, it creates a monetary spigot, the money printer and the kind of accumulation of vast amounts of wealth that can then be given not to who has the most merit, but to who has the most lobbying power, who has the most political power, who has the most connections and the most favors. And so the incentive structure shifts away from how can I do the best thing for people in order to make the most money to how can I play the system in order to make the most money. And you kind of got to play the system. You don't have to, but I understand why a lot of people do, because they're being stolen from all the time. Like if they weren't being stolen from, maybe they wouldn't be so interested in playing this unfruitful game.
Do you struggle with that? Because I do. I always struggle with like, I don't want to participate in the system. I don't want to participate in any of it. But then I think like, oh, well, I have to get ahead to be where I want to be, to help more people. I need to participate in the system potentially.
Sure, but as a small business owner, an entrepreneur, like you're in a more it's more meritocratic.
Meritocratic. Yes, it's meritocratic.
You still have to work based on your merit. You really do, because you don't have access to the financial spigot. You have to make good honey. You have to make good podcasts. We can use technology to amplify your message and get it out to people all over the world, which is absolutely incredible, but it's at the small business level. So how do I opt out? I don't have healthcare insurance. My family doesn't have healthcare insurance. We haven't in many years. There's great alternatives out there. Right now, my favorite one is called Crowd Health, which is a health share. I pay a certain amount every month. It goes into a big group. If somebody has a medical expense that's more than $500, they pay the first $500 and the rest is covered by our group. There's great ways of doing that. We cut out a lot of CEOs. The Crowd Health company themselves, their representatives will help people shop for the lowest cash value. So they'll say, go have your surgery over here instead of over here, or this is the best place to have the MRI. It's going to save the group money. And so it then incentivizes these services to lower their cash price. It's so crazy. I mean, I don't want to get off on this tangent too much, but when I go pay cash for a medical service, I get a price that's very different than what they quote the insurance company.
Massively different.
They crank it up for the insurance company, and then the insurance company cranks it down again. And the whole thing is just like this smoke and mirrors. It's like so hard to understand.
How about that you can negotiate that you can go in and be like, they're like, hey, this is what the surgery costs. And then you're like, well, I got like a couple grand cash in the car. And they're like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
You just told me it was 12 grand, but if I got the 3 grand in the car, you could take it.
Completely. And
that car salesman, let's go back there.
But that would make sense for supply and demand to set price, right? Like this whole fiat infrastructure that makes it so hard to put your finger on what the heck is the value of this thing that I'm receiving. And so most people are just kind of wandering blindly into healthcare, accepting the authority figure's diagnosis and treatment plan, not questioning whether this is in their best interest, not questioning the cost to themselves. They think, oh, it's covered. I'm not paying for it. Well, guess what? They're paying for it. They have a salary. A huge chunk of that is being taken away by their employer and sent to the insurance company. You're paying for it. Somebody's paying for it. And you're paying for it. You're paying more than you should be.
Definitely. And then also some people, some people are like, oh yeah, this is the treatment diagnosis. I'm going to listen. I'm going to do this. And then some people, they go in and they have the treatment and they're like, well, this isn't helping me at all. And they get disillusioned with it. So they say, okay, I'm just not going to use it. And then they pay for it for 20 years.
Yes.
And they don't use it.
Yes. And they come to me.
and then they finally come to you because they're like, I'm feeling so bad. And finally someone told them, well, hey, maybe you should go just try with this guy. You've been paying these people for 20 years. Maybe don't pay them and just, try to pay someone in your community and see what happens. And next thing you know, there's so much healing that's taken place too. Like, that's why there's a precipice that we're at, where there's a lot of healing that's taking place that I'm part of, that I see. And then my wife is still a pharmacist in mainstream medicine. She's still a NICU pharmacist at Wentworth Douglas Hospital. And to see what's, that that we're not, the healers aren't being, there's a precipice. Something's gonna happen. Something is gonna change, and it's within the world. And I don't know what it is, because we're at like a point where we've gotten where there's people like you and I who are, have see under the veil. And then there's a bunch of patients who see under that veil too. And I don't know what the percent, I wish I could understand what the percentage was, because that would help me even ask this question and try to articulate what I'm trying to say right now. Is there is a percentage of people that are here, that it feels higher than it's ever been, that are in the healing modalities, that understand that maybe insurance-based medicine is not the best, algorithmic medicine is not the best. But the algorithmic medicine side is also fighting so hard and to put more propaganda out there that maybe it could completely, the wave will take over all those people. Or that people, if that percentage is big enough, the percentage that I don't know, because it feels bigger to me because I'm in it, can those people rise above and bring healing to their community to the point where that system can fade away?
I think you bring up a really good point, and it's interesting because it seems like a battle or a struggle. The thing that's people, that the action that allows people to switch from the kind of mainstream centralized medical model to something more like free market medicine, it's a simple choice. It's opting out, right? So I have opted out of healthcare insurance. I have opted out of, a lot of things. It's been a simple choice, right? And so, and there's alternatives. So once you opt out, then the question is, well, what will I go to? And I think that some of the early opt-outers who have had that struggle and haven't had a solution, well, we've had to build a solution.
The crowd fund.
Yeah, we build a solution because we know that other people are going to be exiting that system, and we want to be ready for them to come over here and get the help that they need. And and this is not a small percentage. This is, I agree. I don't know what the percentage is, and it depends on exactly what population we're talking about. But I think, just to make it relevant to the work that I've been doing with Healer and what we're doing later today, there's somewhere between 7 and 8 million people in the United States right now with dementia. Okay, like this is one example, one of many, right? And probably 90% or more of them are going to have agitation and behavioral symptoms at some point during their disease process, and that's going to make it really hard on their caregivers. They might have to go to a memory care facility. It's still going to be hard on the caregivers there. It's going to detract from their quality of life. What's going to happen? They're going to be screaming or violent and aggressive or self-injurious or wandering around and exit seeking. That, like, there's lots of examples of what they might do, but what does mainstream medicine have for them? Like, and then what is their opportunity to opt out? So that's a big population. So mainstream medicine, behavioral interventions are the best, like playing them music, maybe using some aromatherapy, doing some massage, telling them stories, reading a book, or that's great, but that's limited, hard to scale.
Yeah,
time and energy,
labor intensive.
And then there's the pharmaceuticals, and there's basically 4 classes that are used. Antipsychotics are the most commonly used. There's also antidepressants, benzodiazepines, and anti-epileptics or mood stabilizers. And none of the other 3 work very well for the behavioral disturbances. And the way that the antipsychotics work is basically just kind of like turn them into zombies. And,
Right.
and that word is used a lot by the family members because it really dampens down their personality and their activity level. And statistically, it's known that the most common class of drugs that's being used to treat this problem, and by the way, only one drug has been FDA approved to treat this problem, and it is also an antipsychotic, and included in the statement, they all have a black box warning that says this is likely to increase morbidity and mortality. Like, it's going to kill you faster and make you sicker. Not only that, there was a study out of Canada from last year that showed that 66% of the people who had started an antipsychotic at their first follow-up in that study, their symptoms were worse. Now, would they have been worse without the antipsychotic, or did the antipsychotic make them worse? Or is this just a solution that's not working? Like it's a solution that's hurting, a lot of people, millions of people
Yep.
just in this country.
Yep.
It's not helping the problem that much. And and I think another so does it seem
Pretty big market. $5 billion market. Yeah, it's
does
psychotic.
it seem like that solution is emergent based on what's the best option for the patient? No, that solution emerges from a system that's completely broken.
Let me introduce you to Elevate, a premium functional mushroom company focused on supporting your highest potential. They offer a range of powerful supplements crafted from the finest medicinal fungi designed to naturally enhance your well-being. Elevate carries everything from mushroom tinctures, capsules, and teas to their delicious mushroom-infused coffees. All of their products are made with USA-grown mushrooms and contain only wild medicinal mushrooms, no psychoactive compounds. I personally use their Focus Tincture every day and love their chai tea blend. It's my go-to for a calming yet energizing boost. Elevate's products support mental clarity, immunity, and overall vitality. They ship nationwide, so whether you're new to functional mushrooms or already a fan, Elevate has something for you. Check them out at shopelevatemushrooms.com, where you will find a detailed description of each product and experience the difference for yourself.
And here's another example using dementia. So back in the 90s and early 2000s, it seemed pretty clear that there was this thing called beta amyloid plaque that accumulates in the brain. And this has something to do with dementia. And it seems like it's part of the problem because it really accumulates. And then, some people started questioning that. Maybe it's an innocent bystander. Maybe it's not the actual cause of the problem. There was a study in 2006 that came out that really showed a causal relationship. It made it very clear that, yes, the beta amyloid is causing this problem. That study's been cited 2,500 times, roughly. That study led to the development, which took a long time, of some very expensive treatments that are good at binding and removing the beta amyloid plaque. These are antibody treatments. So these are biological drugs that are, and by that I mean they're produced in a biological environment, like in an animal or in a cell. They're not produced in a chemical laboratory. So extremely expensive IV infusions. They go after beta amyloid. They came out in the last 5 years. Their benefits are extraordinarily modest. In most cases, not clinically significant unless you catch the disease very early. They have high side effect profiles. Last year, the author of that 2006 paper, turns out he was totally lying. He fudged it all.
Okay.
Like those Western blot pictures, those were just made up. And the whole
The entire
industry
thing.
took a turn in this direction. Think of the resources that were wasted there. Now, on the other hand, we get incredible results using tiny doses of compounds that come from a plant that have a very well-known safety profile, including in dementia. There's been 25 small clinical trials or case reports or case series that have been published. Like I've seen it throughout my career that, the handful of people that come in each year with dementia, we get incredible results. What does it do? It helps them be calm, helps with their anxiety and their agitation. It puts a smile on their face. It helps them sleep. And then in some cases, their neurologic function does improve. I've seen this. It's shown up in some of the studies. It's very well known through many animal studies that you can take old rodents and make them behave cognitively like young rodents by giving them the right dose of THC. You can analyze their brain after that, and the brain of the old rodent looks like the brain of a young rodent based on its genetic expression and the proteins there. You can take a mouse model of Alzheimer's disease where the mouse gets demented very quickly, do the same thing with small doses of THC. We know that THC has been used. That was one of the things mentioned in the earliest historical text of cannabis from China, estimated that it was referring to about 5,000 years ago. Senility was one of the conditions they use it for. Like, this has been going on for a long time. I don't need biological antibodies to bind, beta amyloid. We got, maybe we do, but I think we've got a much better solution here. And that's just one example.
It doesn't work. We know it doesn't work, and the homie made it up. Like literally, like when I saw that came out, it just goes to show me like how messy medicine can be. And it's like one mistake, whether it's nefarious or not, can create a cascading problem to the tune of you can't quantify that. I don't even think you can quantify a number. Like if you're trying to think of economics of what happened,
Yeah,
you can't even figure out what that is.
it's very difficult.
And then because of the opportunity cost of what could have taken place in that time period for growth in the disease state.
I mean, it's devastating for people who listening to this podcast. You know, a lot of them probably know someone in their life or have a family member with dementia right now, and it is freaking devastating that the system has delayed and postponed, and you know, in some ways they missed the boat.
What I would say they did miss the boat, and it's so sad for those people, and it's not only delayed, it's if you see it now, there's like opposite propaganda that's being put out there, you know, against cannabis now, that it's this, it's not as good as we thought, it's causing dementia, the THC is way too high, this is what, you know, all this bad stuff's out there, right?
They know what we're up to.
They know what we're up to.
They're smart. I'll give them that.
Dude, they're smart. They are smart. They are smart. They you know, they want to hold on to that power and that wealth, and we're not going to let them. I do want to talk about another you know, molecule that, you know, a plethora of molecules that are being, you know, ushered into mainstream society that have a ton of benefit, and that you know, that you and I have talked about, and is mushrooms, is psychedelics in general, and the benefits that those have, and how have you you know, started to incorporate that into your practice at all? I'm very curious about where you're at on it.
Yes. So in my practice, I have patients that are using psilocybin-containing mushroom products. Probably the most common use that I see are people that are taking microdose or so-called microdose capsules. And so what that's referring to is a dose that's below the threshold of having a strong psychoactive experience. It's either a very mild or a non-psychoactive experience, but it's working in the background to help them feel more in a flow state, maybe focus and concentrate better. It's helping people with depression, with pain, and with spasticity. And I know people that aren't used to this, it's like too good to be true. Like, oh, here we are, another thing like cannabis that can treat mental health and physical health and pain and spasticity, you know, and all this stuff. But I'd say that it's a little less, the mushrooms are less versatile than cannabis. I mean, cannabis just gets the award because of how it can interact with the endocannabinoid system directly. And I think the mushrooms are, you know, not doing that. But because they can increase the capacity for change and adaptation in the nervous system and potentially in other tissues, probably most evidence suggests in the immune system. So our external world is constantly changing, you know, at a rate that's accelerating. And you just look at how different it is from the environment in which our ancestors evolved. We need to be pretty good at adapting right now. This is a valuable skill to have, you know, in our brain and in our immune system. These are tops. So mushrooms help that process happen. They disrupt the existing patterns that might have become rigid and limiting, and they allow for new patterns to emerge. And so that could be thoughts, that could be behaviors, that can be movements, that can be relationship with somatic signaling like pain and tension. And it can also be immune function.
Dude, I've been searching for that answer, like in my own head, for like you are just this articulation machine, and I'm so appreciative of you for it, because like that's exactly what it is. The way that I say that to people is that, yeah, you know, can we do all this stuff that you're talking about without mushrooms? Yes, we can. Mushrooms, they shorten the gap. They allow us to shorten the time period of it with mental health, with spasticity. Spasticity, is that how you say that word?
Spasticity, right? Like if somebody had a stroke, or if they have CP, or if they're just in so much pain that they have all this muscle tension and they're not able to exercise, whatever. People feel loose on mushrooms, right? Listen to the muscle.
It's literally that I think that's the thing that will be studied almost like the most at some point, is like how spasticity, it allows you to feel different in your body and allows you to bring air and rest.
Yes, to move in a different way, to walk in a different pattern. It wasn't reaching out for something. It's like a different movement on mushrooms.
Yes, and then you could, you know, to reprogram that to just know, because the thought then, the perspective is, oh, I can move different. Oh, maybe I've been holding my energy. Maybe I've been holding Have I been holding my muscle like that for 2 weeks, for my whole life in that extended position? Oh, I can release there. I can bring breath to that part of my chest. I can have relief.
So that's the most common use I see with mushrooms are people actually taking low doses of this anywhere from 3 to 7 days a week. And I see good results overall. Then, I think another role for mushrooms that's very powerful, of course, is the high dose experience. And the value of that is probably somewhat physiological, but more so experiential. And it's having had an experience that lasts 4 or 5 hours and whatever preparation time and integration time preceded and followed it, that experience can be radically changing for people. I'd say the thing that I've been using it and seeing it help with the most is anxiety related to a terminal diagnosis, or we could call it distress, psychological distress, whether it's anxiety or depression associated with like getting a cancer diagnosis or, something.
Knowing you're going to die.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's
Right.
coming and we might have a time frame on that.
Right.
Yep.
Something that every person has to deal with all the time, but most just sweep under the rug. And then, every once in a while you get some bad news from a doctor and it's not under the rug anymore. You have to stare it in the face and deal with it. And that can be hard if you've been sweeping it under for years and years.
Yep.
So I think there's a huge amount of value for that. But you allude to the question, like, do we really need to wait for the diagnosis to use it for that purpose? Or could we excavate our death anxiety that's plaguing every day and modifying our behavior in the background and just, live more in the present and be thankful for every moment we have? Mushrooms could help with that too.
Sounds like a giddy up to me.
And then what's that going to do to your chronic disease? And what's that going to do to your sleep and to your parenting style and to your relationships? I mean, like, it's going to change everything.
It's going to change everything, dude. It's like, yeah, the regulation that comes from it, it changes. It changes everything. It seeps into every aspect of your life because it allows you to realize that, oh, I can change perspective. I'm feeling really bad right now. I can change perspective. Oh, I'm parenting really bad right now because this kid, I can change perspective. I can do this differently because I've done it differently before.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Powerful stuff. Change, adaptability. I think that's what this is alluding to is that the corrective force of healing is not actually coming from the treatment. Treatment is allowing a healing process to ensue. And so this is very osteopathic in nature, and like most maybe we'll call them health-oriented systems of medicine. I think that they've been found all over the world, but there's this idea that the role of the provider and the role of the intervention is to open the door for the healing process to take place, to remove the obstructions to provide the healing process with the starting materials that it needs.
The power that made the body can heal the body.
Yes, we are here right now. We exist. There is some negentropic force that is keeping us together. Our molecules are not currently dissipating off into chaos, right? Like this life force that is organizing us into something more than chaos. It has a focal point. It has an assemblage. It is here with us. It is our body. It is our consciousness. And you said it. It's the same thing as the forces of development that created an embryo and a fetus. These are present with us right now. And if you haven't noticed lately, like if you slice slightly the tip of your finger off while you're cooking, cutting in the kitchen, you can watch that thing grow back so perfectly that the cells know exactly where to go. They know when to stop growing. They know how to bring your fingerprint back. They got microscopic little blood vessels, each one with a little nerve that controls how dilated it is. I mean, like the blueprint, the negentropic forces of life are so precise and so capable that how do we unlock them is a great question in medicine. What can we do to help that process, but not to assume that we're the masters of that process?
Yeah, you said it. What can we do to help this process? Because the process is happening. It's innate. It's within us. And how do we, as practitioners, how do we help other people in the body feel that?
And so a lot of times it's, take this thing every day, but a lot of times it's not that. Many of my interventions are stop doing this.
Yeah.
Many of my interventions are start doing this. Like it doesn't always have to be about substances that we take into the body, but that's a very useful way to go about it as well. Put a substance in your body, but when we really think about it, like in terms of what substances are we going to put in the body, like these single molecules at high doses that have a single target in the body, makes sense sometimes, but the complexity of our physiology, the complexity of that healing process we just talked about, like it's kind of insane to think that a single target intervention is going to really move the needle that much,
Yeah.
but versus interventions.
To the point where that became the biggest thing and the only thing that we really that we rely on.
Right.
We all know how important strength training is for long-term health, but it can be hard to know where to start. I was in the same spot a year ago. You want to make sure you're doing exercises right, avoiding injury, and getting results, but it's easy to feel lost without a plan. That's when I found On Target Fitness. At On Target, you get a custom strength program, personalized attention in a small group setting, and the nutrition coaching you need for real lasting change. And the year I've been working out there, I've gotten stronger, more mobile, and more confident. My form has improved, and even something as simple as walking feels better. The group energy keeps me motivated, and every workout is fun. On Target just opened a new location in Kingston. Now you've got even more options to experience their amazing approach. If you're ready for lasting change, head to www.ontargetfit.com and schedule your session today.
Right. Yeah, it's nuts. But when we can zoom out and recognize that the system is incredibly complex, and therefore interventions that respect that level of complexity and work with it make more sense than interventions that have never even heard the word complexity before, that have been discovered, tested, and approved in a reductionistic laboratory type setting.
Yeah.
Like, again, they have their place, but they're being heavily overutilized to the detriment of the public.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends in clinical research, pharmacists. That's a lot of them go in that direction, and they're the ones who are designing, helping to design some of these studies. And like conversations that I have with my friends that like for what they need to do to include or exclude certain things, certain hospitals, and to make the data work, it's like, and we're talking like 1% to 2%. That's how small the margins are here. So we're getting like a 1% to 2%, 3% maybe, increase in some type of outcome or decrease in some type of outcome. And that is being honed in because they're using this certain hospital system from this certain state, from this certain country, getting data from there. They can pick and choose it, and sometimes it doesn't always work out and the studies fail, but they
don't want to have to be like that guy in the 2006 study and just totally fudge it.
Exactly. Oh, man. So this is just to bring it back to what you said earlier. The the mushrooms have such benefits in adults, and we can see this going, and everyone, the talk is like, there's a big thing like, oh, if you're not 25, you can't do anything that's gonna change your brain. Your brain is still developing, and why would you want to throw something into the mix when the brain is still developing? You want to make sure it's developed before you do cannabis, before you do mushrooms. And, that when we were just, on our last discussion, I was, something I'm thinking, but I have a son, I have a 3-year-old son. So mushrooms have helped me in my life so profoundly that I do a podcast where I talk about them, where I'm trying to be a leader in the space about it and being forefront that this is one of the the greatest things that we have access to and resources that we have to on this earth. And I want to be able to handle that in the right way. When my son comes to me and there's he sees that it's a part of my life because it's as I'm open about it, we're honest. Obviously, I do this in public, and so I came to you and I was just the psychedelics and parenting and saying, okay, well, how do we what is this? How do we prepare for this? Like, do we have to wait till they're a certain age to this? And I just I'd love for you to share some of the stuff that you shared with me that that day, because it's I love every second of it. I think that it is the way forward.
Mm-hmm. So that my talk on psychedelics and parenting really has 2 sections. One is how can the parent use psychedelics to become a better parent? And I might be able to describe like some of the themes in part of it. And then the second part is what you're talking about right now. How do we talk to our kids when they're becoming interested in psychedelics, and how do we give them the right information and be a guide for them in that manner? And I think this is relevant because for me, I tried mushrooms for the first time when I was 15. It was a profound experience for me. I think it helped make me a much better person. I'm very thankful that I did that at that time. It made me more curious and more critical, more independent, more spiritual, and I'm not saying that happened the first time I tried it. That was actually, probably not the right dose, and it was the wrong setting and things like that. But once even that first time, I felt like, wow, there is something special about this. I want to try this again in the right setting and see what I can get out of this. What it has for me. It felt like a magical doorway had opened to myself, right? So even at that age, 15 or 16, I had already been led away from myself by parenting, by school, by societal indoctrination, by all the things that I was exposed to. I was getting very little messaging and encouragement to, hey, Dustin, who are you? Let's find that out and let's help you be that person. It wasn't like that. It was like, here's a bunch of pressure to conform into something. And then I had to set forth on a big unlearning process. Now, I think that adolescents who don't receive that much programming and indoctrination probably have a much lower likelihood of needing mushrooms in their teens. That would be ideal, right? And I've seen examples of this, and I think that that's great. I don't think that every teen needs this stuff, but I think that some teens are drawn to it, and it turns out that it's many of them who are already on psychiatric medications, but still feeling like something's not right. They've taken antidepressants and stimulants and other things like this, and they're not feeling like themselves. They're not fitting in to their life. And some of them are manifesting like pretty significant behavioral, problems, and maybe even are suicidal. And so, I think when the stakes are that high, it's important to consider what are the options here and what's their level of safety. And I think it has to be approached with a lot of care. But when it comes down to it, these adolescents are going to try these substances. Many of them are going to do it. And so then the question is, well, if there's a high likelihood of them doing it anyways, how can we help them shift the likelihood toward having a safe experience so we're reducing the harm and maximizing the benefit? How can we help them with that as parents? And so it has to do with, some of my suggestions involve, of course, like open, honest communication about it, engagement, and helping them be the decision maker. So the parent shows up as the guide, not necessarily as the one that's saying yes or no for them, but empowering them to have some efficacy around this, giving them the warnings about the, potential pitfalls around this, but framing it in a way where it could be helpful. And so much of that is not in what we say, but in how we relate to it ourselves, right? Like most of what our children learn from us is happening through imitation, right? They're imitating our example. And so if we live in a way that's balanced and respectful of these powerful medicines, it's more likely that they're going to have, that same approach to it. So, without getting into all the details, I think that the mistake a lot of parents are making is that they're just absolutely not talking about it at all. They're not demonstrating. If they are using it themselves, they're hiding it, whether it's cannabis or mushrooms or anything else, and then the kids are going to figure out all on their own. Like what sense does that make? Give it some respect and kind of a sacred space to have that conversation. And so the parents then, have this opportunity to use psychedelics themselves to understand how to trust the process of their child's development. Again, it's this movement towards individuality where the parent becomes more emotionally stable in themselves and has less need for their children to behave in a certain way in order to satisfy the parent's unmet needs. And so then when the parent is more secure and more stable in themselves, child has a more stable foundation upon which they can discover who they are and function on their own. And the parent can become more trusting and say, like, the emotional arc, right? When the child's having a challenge or a problem, instead of rushing right over there to make sure everything's all better, the parent sits back and knows, like, somewhere deep inside of them, suffering is actually the thing that sets us free. Why would I want to deprive my child of that? Like,
Man,
well,
remove the emotion from it and be able, or put more emotion into it, because that is, it is so true. Growth only comes from uncomfortability. And like, why wouldn't you want your kids to go? Why wouldn't you want your kids to go? Yeah.
to have that experience, right? And I think in our generation and our parents' generation, there was a lot of this. We're going to help our kids make every decision. We're going to help them solve every problem. We're going to be right there for them. It's different than, like, the real being there for them is knowing, trusting, understanding that they got this, and that you're going to be their safety net. And at times, and so, and valuing their individuality to be different from our own. That's the other thing. Like, back to this idea of, yes, personality fingerprints based on list of values. We don't want to inject those values into our kids from ourselves. We want to discover, who is this unique individual? How can I help them be that way? So I think psychedelics have a powerful role in parenting. I think it's underrealized. In short, I think it's useful for people that are interested in psychedelics and who are parents to once a year have a trip and make it intentional and say, I'm doing this to become a better parent, doing this for the next generation. And it doesn't have to be any more complex than that. Set forth with that intention and eat some grams of mushrooms and go off into the woods or wherever you're feeling safe, and probably going to come back a better parent. But I do have some other tips for how to make the most of it. We don't have time for that today, though.
Yeah, and I, we will have time for that today, because I'm gonna I'll bring the shop up to you sometime, and we'll do a longer sit down where we can really get into some more of this. Maybe we'll do a 10-hour podcast or something, because that sounds
series.
That sounds about right. I am serious with it.
I need a series.
Yeah, a series. Yeah, 100. We need a series, man. I'm 100%, because your articulation is beautiful, and I know that I'm going to have so much feedback on the stuff that you've been able to articulate today from my guests that are just thankful for saying, okay, it's a place where some people are, where it's like, okay, some people are saying, oh, someone's suicidal, they're this, this might be helpful. Maybe we should explore this as a tool in a very safe way, and we can figure this out together, instead of, the child being off on their own and doing it, because they said that they have access to it. I've learned that seeing my friends, who have 12-year-olds to 11-year-olds. It's like, you don't have nearly as much control as you think that you do. Like, these kids are going to do what they're going to do. And so, having that trusting relationship and your ability to articulate it, man, and to help me feel comfortable with it is great. And, my wife, she's going to listen to this, and it's going to be great, because I'm getting her to see this as benefit, and she sees the benefit for it as me, but she's still mainstream she's still in it. And so when she listens to this, I'm sure that she's gonna, it'll help her consider that maybe we're gonna go on that trip together, and see the intention of being good parents. So Dustin, I thank you so much, man, for doing this with me today. You are a force. You're a really good person. I always enjoy our time together. And we're going to do a series. So I hope you're ready for it.
The trade-off is that we didn't get there today that much, but we're going to be helping you get your podcast into the world of value for value media content, which means that as your listeners enjoy your material, they're going to be able to stream you tiny bits of Bitcoin directly to your Lightning wallet, to your Lightning node, and they can set it in any of their modern podcast apps, send you maybe a cent a minute or 20 cents a minute or whatever it is. And when you say something they love, they're going to hit the boost button and send you a little bit more. And that's just another example. Like, the technology is here for us to not rely on advertisers, for us to not rely on YouTube guidelines, on the platform censorship kings and queens. Like, we can opt out of these systems, and we can do it incrementally and gradually, but there's a whole new economy for content. that's emerging, and it is called Value for Value, and it operates on the Bitcoin Lightning Network, and there's lots of apps and clients that run it. It's beautiful. So when I listen to your podcast next time, we're going to get that into your RSS feed.
Yes. The value for value. You know, I love it. You know, the best advice he gives me the best advice out of all of it. The best advice that this man gave me was every week, just put it away, whatever, $50, $100 into Bitcoin, whatever you can do, just do it. And so that's what we do. That's the best way to fight it. Keep opting out. So take your $50, $100, whatever you could do each week, and keep putting into, keep buying Bitcoins.
It's freedom. Yeah. Opt out of the system when you can, incrementally. It doesn't have to be black or white, but know that there's an infrastructure for freedom that's growing at least as fast as the control infrastructure is growing. Like there is something really beautiful that's happening. And as you zoom out, you see, wow, we needed all that centralization. We needed all that slavery. We needed all that suffering in order to birth this new era of freedom, this new system.
It gives us the infrastructure to birth the new system of freedom.
It's necessary.
It's necessary.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. So I think thank you for, information is really the tool. It always has been. How to disrupt these systems, how to promote human freedom. This is why it's the first one on the Bill of Rights. Like, we need the freedom to convey this information to people. The platforms are limiting your capacity to do that to some extent. Thankfully, not fully.
Right.
But eventually, we're going to outgrow them. They're gonna shrink themselves, right?
Yeah, shrink themselves
and less relevant over time. And freedom tech is going to survive and thrive. So thank you, Steve. It's been a great conversation today.
Yes, brother. It has been a great conversation, and I love that. Like, I just love that. I'm saying, like, trying to put you up, and you're like, oh, well, guess what? I'm going to help you too, because that's the value. That's what when I do this podcast, I just want to dump value on people. I'm giving people value. Here you go. Here's all the giddy up. I'm going to give you content creation, give it all, and you end it with like, oh, I'm going to come back and take care of you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, brother. Well, I see you, man. I hope that you guys see Dustin. Giddy up. The series is coming. So, thank you guys. Check them out. Healer.com, Dustin Sulak, Integrate Health. Guys, please check him out. Re-listen to this conversation like 6 times because it's a good one. I know that I'm going to. Brother, thank you so much for coming on today. Giddy up. We'll see you guys next time.